Justin, welcome back, my man.
Brad, it's good to be here. I'm excited. I got dressed up for this occasion.
Oh, you have a tie on.
Yeah,
Jesus, I put
dress
on
for
my
the
best
job that you
white
want.
tee. What job is that?
Well, I figured, usually you're the one that's looking pretty dapper with the hat and everything. I don't know if that's just a Europe look. Now that you're in Costa Rica, you're switching it up, but yeah, I just wanted to bring the tie in, be very professional, start this off good.
Yeah, well, I shaved my head and I have an ugly head, and I'm not ready to reveal that yet. So you'll see me in a lot of hats. I've always worn hats anyway. I think it's just because I played baseball. Do you find that you've worn more hats because you played baseball?
The thing is, I don't wear enough hats right now. When I say enough, it's just, I'll wear a ball cap every once in a while, but I've wanted to explore it sound the way the sounds so funny. I wanted to explore wearing other hats. It's just I don't have the ears for a lot of those because these ears stick out a little bit. And I've been asking my wife, I'm like, I want to wear a hat. Back in the day, if you look back in the 50s and 40s and even up through part of the 60s, men wore hats all the time. The thing is, I just don't know if I've got the head for some of those hats or if I wear some of those hats if I look like I'm a tryhard. It works for you. Like I'm not, trying to sound like I'm hitting on you or anything, but like when you wear some of those hats, I'm like, dude's pulling it off, and I'm a little jealous.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was debating whether to shave my face before I joined you because I knew you'd be clean shaven, being a Marine veteran and all. And I asked my wife, and she was like, "Well, what do you think looks good?" And I said, "I don't really groom myself for myself. I think of it as being a pleasant appearance to someone else. Am I the only one that's like that?" And I explained to her, I said, I could be a 10 and I would not know. I could also be a 5 and not know. The only reason I know I'm not a 2 or a 3 is because I've been around enough other dudes to know that I do some basic grooming. So, I'm decent looking. Don't have anything on you, but that's sort of how I think about looks. And you probably heard me talk about looks. I think I said I was a 7 or something like that. We have no, as men, we don't know if we're good looking. Do you feel that way?
Oh, geez. I mean, I don't know if I should. I don't know if I'm qualified to say like good looking or not or anything like that. I know you compliment me, so I appreciate it. That means a lot coming from you. I usually have a beard. Usually I'm bearded up.
Oh,
The beard's got a lot of gray, so sometimes I mix it up and try to reduce the age appearance. But I prefer to have a beard. But this is just a different time.
well, it's funny you say that because what I ended up shaving was the gray in my stubble here, and I don't have it here. And I really wanted to get rid of this thing because I don't even know what you call this, but I forgot my guards. It's a long story, but I'm glad we got
Yeah,
the small talk out of the way because you and I plan to talk about some heavier stuff today.
yeah, yeah. We
Because
do.
you've been through some stuff, man. You
Yeah,
have. And as you
yeah.
know, I have too. And I haven't
Hmm.
really, I've shared it with good friends of mine. You know my story to some extent. I interact with guys every single week for my coaching program, and I withheld it from them for over a year because I wanted to tell them in person. That's how important it was to me. Yeah, a lot of tears. I don't plan to cry today. Don't make me cry, Justin. But yeah, I think it's important that we get our stories out. And I also think it helps. I mean, a lot of people think I'm weird, but you being a dapper dude and you don't look like somebody who would be discussing what we're going to be discussing today. So hopefully us having a decent appearance, clean shaven in parts of our face, it'll help to convey the message to where people think, oh, they're these guys struggle too, big time, right?
Yeah,
And have.
yeah.
And they've been able to fight it pretty effectively. So I don't know where you want to start, but I thought that was the preamble we needed.
Yeah, it's a good preamble, and I agree. I mean, I think it'll be pretty evident as we get rolling, kind of where we're going with this. But yeah, it's a conversation when you and I kind of had a little back talk about what we were discussing that I think is very important. It's important for me not only because I have always wanted to share this aspect of my story, not for anything to direct it back to me, but because frankly, I mean, my life has changed forever, and I've seen it and so many other friends. And it's the reason why I become an advocate. And I think we'll just maybe just reveal what it is. It's the conversation around psychedelics and and what personal experience that I have to bring to this, not only in my observation of friends and, I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I do a lot of research on things, but it's been life changing, and I'm happy to start jumping into the story if it makes sense.
Please, please, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a Marine veteran. I served 10 years active duty from 2004 to 2014. I was at the Naval Academy when September 11th happened, and it's an interesting kind of experience, my professional experience, because I went to the Naval Academy in 2000. We were not fighting any wars, so when you show up there, you got all these other grizzled Marines and sailors that are trying to train you and get you ready for war. Because at the end of the day, that's what our military is for. It is designed to, when the call comes, go execute violence on our nation's enemies. So you have to cultivate a certain type of person. But, in 2000, we're not fighting any wars. It had been some time since, in fact, I remember the things that we used to watch were like Black Hawk Down. It's just small little things that had happened in the past. And not to say that that was an insignificant event, it just wasn't a big time war. But you get these guys who are like, I remember specifically when I was going through my plebe summer training where, they bring out like a casket draped in the flag and they're playing Lee Greenwood and trying to get you all emotional about it. And I even remember, so when September 11th happened, that's when everything changed, because we knew then that we were going to war. And in fact, it changed my mentality, because I had thought when I went to the Naval Academy, I'm like, man, I'm going to do this Top Gun thing. I'm going to go fly Navy jets, ride around on my motorcycle, play volleyball, chase girls. Like, I was thinking more of the lifestyle and how cool it would be to be a jet guy. Well, when I watched the World Trade Center fall, I knew that everything changed. I knew that I wanted to be a Marine. I wanted my hands in the dirt, and I wanted to take the fight to the enemy. And the best way for me to do that would be to fly attack helicopters, because I was going to be low. I was going to be providing what's called close air support to Marines on the ground, and everything changed. And it's not until 2003 when the invasion of Iraq starts happening, where you start to see guys that you went to school with be killed in Iraq. And Ron Winchester was an offensive lineman at the Naval Academy when I was first there. He was the first name that I remember of a guy that we all knew, because he was a football player. These guys are legends on campus. He dies in Iraq. J.P. Blecksmith, a quarterback, eventually is killed in Iraq as well. And one of my electrical engineering professors, Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Shea, was killed in Iraq. And so then it becomes real. It's like, not only are we fighting this war, but we are losing people that we just saw on campus last year. So that really starts to shape your perspective on what's happening. And I was all for it. I was all for it. I knew that this was my purpose, and I was very motivated to do my job well. And I did. And I would eventually become a Cobra attack helicopter pilot, 4 combat deployments, 1 to Iraq in 2008, and then Afghanistan 3 more times in 9, 10, 11, and 12. And for anybody that's in the military that knows kind of that deployment cycle, 4 deployments over 4 years, that's a lot. In fact, I think when I did the math, 30 out of the 48 months at one point, I was living in Iraq or Afghanistan in a war environment. And it's not even just that. It's even when you're home, you're training for the next deployment. And the training is, especially in aviation, especially in marine aviation, the training is intense. I mean, we'll fly what we call low light level, really dark training missions out in the desert, training for these missions. And even in a safe environment where you're just up leveling your skills in a training environment, it's still dangerous. Guys are unfortunately killed all the time in training. And I had a few close calls even in training. So I say all that because I did not realize how much that affected me physiologically. When I left the Marine Corps, actually, when I came back from my 4th deployment, There's actually a picture I have of the last flight I had in Afghanistan. I was 150 pounds. And for perspective, I normally carry like 170. Like right now, as I sit, I'm probably a very trim 175 ish. I hadn't been 150 pounds since I was like 14 years old. And what was happening is it was the cumulative stress that was effectively eating away at me. And then you kind of pair in a lot of the things that happen to you, whether it's I think I shared this on the last time we were on the podcast, where there's a mishap that happens on one of my deployments to Afghanistan, where 4 of my friends are killed, and I'm there to help recover some of the survivors, and just a lot of the trauma that comes up, and even just being asked to end somebody's life. There's a lot of weight that happens. And because we're trained to compartmentalize, you put these things in nice little buckets, and you have to, like, you can't have a military force that doesn't compartmentalize things, because you still have to do the mission. So what I didn't realize is that cumulative physiological stress and me putting all these things in nice little buckets and never addressing them really damaged me. And I remember talking to my mom in 2014 when I first went to Navy medicine for psychological help. And she was like, I don't know how to tell you this, Justin, but you're not the same person. I was bitter. I was angry. I remember sitting on my couch for hours doing nothing, just eating ice cream and watching shows in the darkness. In the prime of my life, like mid-30s, like I should be out there living, and I was just existing. And it would be, the Navy medicine protocol is, you do talk therapy, they get you on some SSRIs, and I just didn't react well to that. It did not work for me. In fact, I would say it made it worse. So I got off
Sorry,
of
which
that, and
the talk therapy or the SSRIs or
the
both?
SSRIs specifically. And the talk therapy, I think it matters who you work with. And I just don't think that I had really good practitioners that I was working with. But it was the SSRIs that made me feel numb, detached, just had no vitality or zeal for life. So I get off of that stuff. I kind of just try to self-cope. And I self-cope basically by just not acknowledging things. And I do that for maybe another 6 years. 2020 comes around, and I'm going through a really, really, really painful divorce. And I just kind of start spinning out of control. And I remember sitting on my couch in my condo. I think I had probably sat there for 10 or 11 hours. I slept there the night before. I didn't even sleep in my own bed. I slept on the couch. I woke up, just kind of sat staring at the ceiling or infomercials on the TV. And I wasn't feeling anything. That's the best way I can describe it, is I was just numb. I was just numb. I didn't feel happiness. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel joy. I just felt numb. And so I crafted this idea of, all right, maybe if I do something to jumpstart my adrenaline system, that I might feel something. And I was living in Montana at the time. So I went to this trailhead, and this was September. Yeah, late September. And went to this trailhead. It's Beartooth. If anybody knows the Bozeman area, Beartooth is a little bit outside of Bozeman. It's a beautiful hike. I love hiking. I love Montana. And I go out there because it's later in the evening, around 6:30, 7 o'clock. And I go hiking. And anyone that's been out in bear country knows, in the late fall, if you're going to go on a trail like Beartooth, you have a higher probability of running into a bear, because they're
You
out
don't
there.
say.
They're out
What
there.
happens on Lion Tooth Trail?
You don't want to find out. Yeah. So I go out there, and I say Beartooth. I meant to say Blackmore Trailhead. Yeah. I'm thinking of bears. It's Blackmore. So I go at the Blackmore Trail, and I start hiking, And I think I was just trying to feel something. So I'm about maybe like an eighth of a mile in, and I see some activity off of my left periphery and shoot across. Was it a bear? I don't know. It was some kind of large animal, and it scared the shit out of me. Like I
And
actually
that's what
may,
you were seeking? Like it's better to have the shit scared out of you than feel nothing at all? Is that what you were getting at?
yeah, I wanted to feel something. And in a way, see, there's also this thing that happens when you're flying combat missions, and this is, I wouldn't say this is unique to pilots, but I would suspect it happens to attack pilots more often, especially attack helicopter pilots, because every day there's something that happens, and I'm getting juiced to go fly on a mission. Now, 9 times out of 10, nothing happens, but when the horn goes off and you're running, your adrenaline's pumping. And so for 30 months of my life, I would get these high hits of adrenaline constantly, constantly. And that's part of the physiological stress that happens because you're always operating at this really high stress level, and that becomes like your new norm. Like you're used to being keyed at that point. And so my theory was is I needed to feel something, and I needed that adrenaline.
Mm.
And I got it. I mean, I'm not embarrassed to say that I think I actually pissed myself, because I realized at that point, I'm like, what the hell are you doing, man? You're out here walking at the worst time you can possibly walk or hike during bear season at a place that's known to have grizzlies. I don't have bear spray. I don't have a weapon. I have no way of defending myself. I mean, I could have gotten out there and gotten completely mauled by a bear, all because I was just trying to feel something. And the best way I can describe all of that context is what was happening is the light of my life was slowly being extinguished, and I had exhausted all options. Because I, even
Or that
prior to
light of
that,
that light of your life being what? Your
just
wife?
no, I mean, no, waking up every day and just being excited about being alive.
And
I wasn't
this
excited about,
was this was September 2020.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I
But this
wasn't
is during
excited about
COVID
being alive.
too.
Yeah, yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. And so like when that's happening, and I should also say I had also attempted prior to that, the previous year, to go back on SSRIs and try talk therapy again, and the VA set me up with it, and again it just didn't work. So I hit the trail, and I get the shit scared out of me. I go back and I call a friend of mine, and I kind of tell her, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I think that I've tried everything, and I think I'm just going to live like this for the rest of my life. And she said, well, you haven't tried everything. She was familiar with my situation. We were talking a lot about what was happening. She's like, you haven't tried everything. Have you ever considered doing psychedelic assisted therapy? And I was like, that sounds pretty hippie. I mean, that stuff it fries your brain, or I had all these preconceived notions of psychedelics. And she really encouraged me to explore that. As a side note, she eventually becomes my wife. So I marry this
Wow.
person. Yeah. So that's a whole other conversation. But she saved my life because that was the recommendation that I needed. And I sought out kind of a program where I went through a psilocybin assisted therapeutic intervention, which, I mean, I'm not trying to be dramatic when I say this. This is the absolute reality. If you can talk about a fork in the road just from one single experience, it was that. It was almost as though it was my life before psychedelics and my life afterwards. Because I went through this experience. It's with a therapist, you have other people there, so it's a very supportive environment. And it wasn't even like it was the next day. It was that night after the experience was over. I mean, crying. Let me put it this way. I can count on my hands how many times I had cried in the previous 15 years. It was like one or two times. I cried so much that night because it was just this massive release. And I knew that night that my life would never, ever be the same again. And it hasn't. I mean, that changed everything for me. It brought me back to engaging with my feelings. It helped me reconcile a lot of things that were going on in my life at the time and also previously. And I became, from that moment, just a huge advocate for psychedelics because I lived it, I experienced it. All of the kind of preconceived notions that I thought were there for these medicines were completely erased. I started to do more research and I started to really see the breadcrumbs for other friends, particularly veterans that were in a similar situation to me. And when those breadcrumbs were there, I said, "Hey, just like just like Chelsea told me, you haven't tried everything." And helping those veterans get set up in similar programs and having similar experiences. And I would not exaggerate to say that I've probably had at this point 15 friends that I've introduced to these programs, and every single one of them come back with the same experience that it's changed their life forever.
Wow. So her telling you that you hadn't tried everything, you hadn't had friends that had tried psychedelics before for PTSD or depression or anxiety? No?
No, I'm sure I had, but I didn't know it. I didn't know of any
Mm,
other friends that had. I mean, I think the scene has changed where now it's becoming more of a conversation, particularly with the Texas ibogaine initiative and a lot of other there's a lot of other veterans groups that start springing up around 2020 around the same timeline. Vets is one of them, Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. There may be some other ones that are a little bit, more long in the tooth, but this whole idea of veterans going to psychedelic assisted therapies really starts to explode kind of like 2018, 2019, 2020, but I just didn't know any friends that had done it. And if they had, they didn't share it because I think of the stigma.
yeah, and I think even if you had heard of it, you might have dismissed it quickly and thought, "That's not me." I that's how I thought.
Yeah, and I think I'm, I've alluded to it before. I'm a little bit of a research nerd. I like researching. I like reading books. I do actually read, medical journals, publications on this. So I think what also sold me, I didn't just jump into this experience without knowing what I was getting into. I had done some research prior to, and I was familiar with a book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. That is a excellent book that if anybody is kind of on the fence, that is a great book to start with because Michael Pollan, he's an investigative journalist. He writes about things that he has experiences with, and he walked into this his own experience. I mean, I think he had like a psychedelic experience when he was younger, but it was when you start hearing these things about set and setting and how that changes the experience, that is true. So he went more into the prescriptive, ceremonial, constructed experience rather than like, hey, I'm going to take some mushrooms and listen to music or go to a concert, which nothing against that. But when you go and use psychedelics in a controlled setting where you have a therapeutic support, that just changes the game, particularly if somebody's well versed in those traditions of using psychedelics in those settings. So Michael Pollan's book, I mean, really sealed the deal for me. And I think a lot of people who jump into this, who read that book would say the same thing.
I read that book, and at that time, I was exactly the person I just described, where I was like, "Oh, this isn't me." You
Yeah.
know, I yeah, I remember reading Michael Pollan's book. He was on Rogan. People poo-poo Rogan, but I've gotten so many good book recommendations from Rogan, and I like to think gotten smarter. And so the people who mock the idea that a bunch of gym bros or whatever they're calling us we who listen, it's it's BS. But I've got so many questions. If you got some answers, some time for answers for me. I want to
I'll
know
do the
what
best
you
I can.
what do you think of this idea that when someone is depressed, were you clinically depressed? Can I ask that?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a diagnosed PTSD condition. Yeah.
Okay. So, what do you make of the chemical imbalance talk?
I don't know enough about the neuroscience or the neurobiological mechanisms between the imbalance talk. I have listened to people on podcasts that are much smarter than me say that it's probably a bunch of horseshit, that it's not really true, that there are other mechanisms that explain what's happening there. But for me, I mean, yeah, maybe you could talk about dopamine levels and serotonin and kind of what's happening there, but I don't really buy that there's a chemical imbalance. I think there's, for me at least, I think there were just, when I talk about those buckets, me putting those buckets of experiences and containing them, I think what that does is if you don't address, if you don't confront things that have happened in your life, it sits in your brain and sits in your memory and is actually embodied in you. And it's just a constant source of stress. It's all, you may not actively be thinking about it, but it's there. And until you release that energy, you release that experience, it will slowly eat you alive. And that's when I say the light of my life was being extinguished and I didn't feel any vitality or excitement, that's what was happening. I was being consumed by all of these experiences and I needed to release them and let them go.
What do you make of talk therapy? Is it just a negative feedback loop where you're going and talking about your problems and that makes it worse, just the act of talking about it? Do you think that's a thing?
I I would say this. I think the best way to answer that is I think talk therapy has a role. I think there are plenty of people that have had positive experiences with them. And so as a tool, there's no reason to think that it doesn't work. Like everything, it probably depends on the quality of the therapist that you're working with. But what is the difference here is I alluded to it before. So for anyone that's listening that has never heard these conversations, when you start talking about psychedelics, it's the set and setting that makes the difference. Meaning, I could consume psilocybin mushrooms and sit in my condo and do nothing. That will not have the same effect if I'm sitting in a therapeutic session where there's music and certain instrumentation that's played and a person that is well versed in that experience themselves that can help extract out and direct kind of what's happening. Said another way, people who are consuming mushrooms and going to a concert in a fun environment, it's not going to be the same thing if I'm going in with a mindset of, hey, I'm here to peel back a few scars and heal. It's a completely different experience. So the therapist conversation is a good one because I am a big believer in that what's missing the broader discussion of psychedelics is it's not the psychedelics that are actually repairing things. They are a tool that help you get in the mindset to address things and receive things. And yes, there's some brain things that are going on which we can discuss, but the most important thing of that is having that therapeutic support and actually the integration work that happens afterwards. And I'll say that because this is actually shown in science. What is happening in the brain is, for lack of better words, your brain is rewiring. It's neuroplastic. So you're getting neurons that are firing in different ways. You actually have this default mode network, which is kind of like the ego driven kind of way of thinking of like I, me, my, which is very necessary for survival. In a psychedelic experience, that gets quieted. And you have different parts of the brain that never communicate that are now communicating. And what that allows you to do is drop your ego and look at experiences from a very abstract, almost, I wouldn't say detached way because that sounds like it's unemotional, but you are an observer of these experiences. And it allows you to reconcile and readdress those things and organize them in new ways. If you don't have a therapist that can help guide you through that integration period, then you will miss what is, I would say, is the greatest benefit of these experiences, which is the integration period that happens that night the next day and for a week or two thereafter, because your brain is still what's called neuroplastic for like 10 or 12 days. So that's like the great time to in effect rewire. If you've heard Michael Pollan describe it, it's kind of like as you gain experiences in life and you run into these habitual ways of being, it's like going on the ski slope and running the same run every time. You're just hitting the same line. What psychedelics do is it's like a fresh snowfall, and it's like a totally new slate. And I knew that going in, and I for sure experienced that. And again, I think to answer the therapist question is, I don't think talk therapy in of itself is insufficient, nor do I think that just taking a psychedelic and sitting on your couch is sufficient as well. I think you need to have both. And I think that's the difference between what's happening today versus what happened in the 60s. In the 60s, and I think there were probably great things about it, but that movement was unshackled from one, the traditional roots of how these medicines have been used. And I think that's a problem. But it was also not tethered to the reality of, hey, these tools can be used to actually help people heal. Yeah, maybe it enhances your concert experience, and watching Jimi Hendrix on LSD is probably like wild, but that's not what I'm going for. I'm going to heal myself and to become a better version of myself, and that is done with therapy and psychedelics being used in unison.
Are there hallucinations and visions associated with psilocybin use?
Yeah, in general, what happens, at least in my experience with psilocybin, and I can speak to other friends who have explored other medicines, but visually, I think the misnomer here is, or what's not well understood is, I thought I was gonna go see like creatures and things that, you know, if I opened my eyes, I would see stuff that wasn't there. And that's just not how it works. Everything you see visually is still there. It just changes. It changes with music. I mean, I watched, there's a cloth by the Shipibo people in South America. They're out of Peru. They work with ayahuasca, but this therapist had one of those cloths. And I was looking at this cloth, and the way that it's made with like these little geometrical patterns that usually will eventually make the image of a frog or a snake or whatever. In a normal state, you're looking at this cloth and you see it for what it is. But in an altered state with psychedelics, you will start to see the cloth change, and it'll move with music, and it just, that's the only way I can describe it, is it just changes. There's also the effect of closing your eyes and just going inside your mind and seeing what your mind sees. And I would argue that those visions are more potent and powerful because it is constructing in a way some of these memories, not per se in like a detailed fashion, but you're able to see things in your mind that you just can't see with your eyes open. And then I would say there's also this emotional component where the best way I can say it for me is, as I had kind of alluded to, my heart was hardened and closed off. I mean, I couldn't feel anything, but within 60 minutes of me consuming psilocybin, I was just like, I was reconnecting to my heart again, and I was feeling things that I hadn't felt for 20 years.
If I can get to, personal questions in here. So, how long were you married the
I
first time?
My first wife, I was married. We had been together for almost 9 years. Married for I don't know, six of them.
And being dead emotionally presumably did not help the marriage.
No, no. I mean, there are a lot of. I mean, the reality is the reason why that was so painful is because I when I had met her, I was in a very fractured emotional state. So I met her when I was already probably emotionally compromised. And I think the nature of our relationship was kind of founded on me being in that state. And it just became a challenge for us to stay married.
Mm. And COVID, being indoors all the time, that probably doesn't help either. I think a lot of marriages were ended during COVID.
Yeah.
I'm curious too about you talk about needing this adrenaline. The last time I had you on, you talked about making some risky investments. Or was it oil futures? And I
Yeah.
thought about, well, I wonder if someone who's been in so much combat is more prone to riskier things in life post combat for that reason. Like you'll never, I mean, a lot of the reason they say that professional athletes, for example, drugs or rock stars is like you'll never replicate that high you had when you were on stage and 10,000 people were singing your song back at you. You can't get that high. And so they resort to drugs. So anyway, I wonder if that plays a role in how you ended up depressed. Like you didn't feel anything after feeling like the max a person can feel in terms of fear and adrenaline and victory and camaraderie with your brothers and losing them, which has to be terrible.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And in fact, that is one of my working theories as to the what people call the veteran, whether it's the veteran suicide problem or just the challenge that veterans have transitioning. Now, it's a little different in the sense now that you have a lot more veterans who have never experienced combat. So some of this is probably moderated by that fact. But my feeling when I got out, seeing friends who had similar backgrounds, whether they're pilots or Navy SEALs or whatever, is you have an opportunity in your life to be the best at something. I say this with all humility. By the time I went on my fourth combat deployment, just because I had done it so much, I remember specifically a few missions where I look back and I was like, damn, I'm pretty good at this. I am pretty damn good at this and have to be one of the best in the world at what I'm doing. And that reinforcement of being so good at something in a high stakes environment where it is life or death, you just don't replicate that when you start growing a beard and you go into the civilian world and now you're working in the marketing department. It's just not the same thing. And so I think I have long thought that a lot of the reasons why veterans struggle is so much of their identity is wrapped up in doing something that is hard, doing it something better than nobody could ever do, and then removing all that other stimulus of adrenaline and putting everything on the line and nailing it. Yes, to me it is. I would hypothesize that, take a high profile athlete, let's say, and I can think of a few that I would wonder if this is happening to them, where they have an injury that ends their career. And it's an unexpected ending of the career where they were playing quarterback on Sundays in the NFL and now they're not. And if they don't have a support structure that helps them reconcile the fact that they just went from being elite to just being the next dude, I would suspect that they suffer from depression and other issues that would probably benefit from some kind of therapeutic intervention, potentially with psychedelics, to help kind of recage who you are and find that new identity. Because I think that's the other piece that I would say is the benefit that I had is, for whatever reason, that psychedelic experience helped me be okay with me and not have to worry about like Justin Jackson being a rock star at this or doing that. Like it sounds cliche from people who talk about these things. It really dampened my ego to the point where I don't really care what people, I should say it like this, I care less about what people think of me. That experience gave me the confidence to say, I'm just okay with who I am. And all of this is just an extra benefit. Like I walked away loving life and not worried about any of the other stuff.
Totally relate. Totally relate. Yeah, too many people, one, have their job title or career intertwined with their person, or they gain confidence based on the reflection of or like how other people treat them. But confidence comes from internal sources, or at least it should. What do you have any idea how much psilocybin you took?
So the therapist that I work with, based on my conversations with her, and I told her I'm here to tear off some scars and I'm ready to go deep. I think it was between 4 to 5 grams. So what they would call a quote unquote hero's dose. It was enough to just rock my world. I'll say that
Did you have to do
in all the
anything
good ways.
thereafter?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Did you have to do anything thereafter to maintain, or like a booster they call it?
Within the experience, the way that this was designed is you take a pretty hefty dose to start, and I think for some people who maybe have a different profile, that therapist would have recommended a smaller dose, and then 2 or 3 hours later give you a little bit more. She gave me a big one, and then I had like a small, maybe like a gram or two within 3 or 4 hours, just to kind of string the experience out, because it's psilocybin. If you're hitting a second dose of the medicine, that's probably like a 6 hour experience. So not as long as it's about as long as what I understand ayahuasca to be, maybe a little bit, not as long as ibogaine. I think ibogaine is a little bit longer, a little bit more harsh. I think that's maybe something we may talk about later. But yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of a booster in about 6 hours. And
How
I should
long?
say, I'm sorry to interrupt. I should say the reason why I say that is 6 hours of working with that mushroom did more for me than 11 years of therapy.
And if somebody were interested in this sort of therapy, how much time would they have to set aside from their everyday life to go to Montana, for example? And then what would the cost look like?
Well, I think so. This is an interesting kind of philosophical debate as well. It's obviously not legal in the United States to do. You can go to places like Oregon where it's decriminalized. And if you did go that route, it is, I think the last time when I looked at the prices, I think it was like a couple grand for a psilocybin experience. And that is predicated on the fact that there's licensing, there's insurance, there's all of these other layers that these providers have to stack on that make the cost of that experience prohibitive. The other option is, and to answer your question about time, a psilocybin experience is one night. Like, could you do it 2 nights in a row? Yes, there are some programs that will do that because there's thought to be kind of an additive effect. Once you have one experience, there's another. Ayahuasca circles, from my understanding, are usually like that. They're multi-night events. So one night at least for mushrooms. If you're going to go a different route, probably depends on what the program is. That said, you can find, my understanding is, different costs if you go overseas because they don't have the same insurance requirements or the same liability. And I'm sure there's some comfort for people to maybe have this idea that, hey, I can have this safe experience and I'll pay more for it. I mean, to be a little cheeky here, I mean, psilocybin mushrooms grow outside of the cow pasture and cow shit. So if you knew what you were looking for, you don't have to pay anything. You just have to make sure you just have to make sure that you don't pick the ones that kill you and pick the ones that'll help create that experience. The philosophical conversation around this is, there is, from talking to friends who have gone this route, there is a very vibrant underground community of practitioners that will, for those type of experiences, it may be like four to $500.
Mm.
But again, you're going into the underground, so to speak. You're committing an illegal activity, at least according to current law. But there are people out there that are big believers in this, that are well trained, that operate in the underground. And I know of plenty of friends that have worked with those people. And if somebody came to me for a recommendation, I would have no problems introducing them to people that I know that are in that space who can give a safe experience. But yeah, so you're either going to spend 2 grand going to Oregon, or you can hop on a plane and go to Mexico, or you can find somebody on the ground, and then your final option is to go hunting and cow shit, whatever you want to do.
And at what point would you recommend somebody do this? Like how do they know if they're a good candidate for it?
I think the way that my therapist described this to me, because I've kept in touch with her over the years, as I have run into many, many, many friends that, in my view, could benefit from it. But the best way to know is you feel the calling. You
Mm.
feel called to it. And, man, I mean, this could be a whole other podcast episode for another day, but there's a whole, I believe there's a spiritual component to this, but I think you feel called. And that's how I felt. Like, it wasn't in my awareness set at that point, but when Chelsea told me, "Hey, have you thought about this?" It became in my awareness set. And then when I did the research, I was like, yes. So you're a good candidate when you're well informed about what you're about to do. You have probably a pretty good idea of what the program you may be entering, and you feel called to do it. Because my understanding is people who feel forced or go into this without full acceptance don't always have the best experiences. And I'm not saying bad trips per se. I'm just saying they don't have the same experience because they weren't fully invested in letting go.
Mm. Man, I could ask you questions all day. Maybe we should have a part three because I am so curious how, man, that long of being depressed and not being able to find a cure has to be so miserable. Did you think about ending it all? I hate to ask you that, but I feel like I should.
No, I mean, I was never at all suicidal, but I think what's not addressed in the conversations around, suicide or veteran suicide is there are a number of people who are just kind of giving up. And I think that's where I was at. And I mean, shoot, like me going on the Blackmore Trailhead, I mean, that's not me being suicidal, but what's the end result if I did run across a sow and a grizzly? I mean, it was definitely crazy. But no, I never got to that point. But I will say, I think part of the reason why I'm so passionate about this, and why, despite the stigmas and the risks of having these conversations, felt like I'm obligated to share my story, is because I have lost many friends to suicide, but even in the last 18 months, have lost two friends. And I remember one specifically. I went to an event with him in Montana just a couple falls ago, and I was looking at him, and he seemed good to me. He was good. I was like, we were just talking at this black tie affair, and then 3 weeks later he kills himself. And I remember having conversations with him about psychedelics and like, hey man, what would it look like if you did this? And what was happening is he put up the facade. He was showing everybody that he was good, but deep down inside he wasn't. And then you mix in alcohol and poor decision making and whatever happens, and that's what happened to him. And so when those stories happen, when you have friends that I know with a high degree of certainty that if I could get someone like him into those environments, that he would still be alive today. I walk away from that saying, I have to do something about this. And this fact about it being illegal is total bullshit to me. I will say
Agree.
that when we talk about these things, there's a difference between ethical and lawful. There are a lot of things throughout our history that have been lawful that are not ethical. This is one of them. It is not ethical to have these medicines be illegal. And I hope, particularly with the way that Texas ibogaine initiative is happening and with Bobby Kennedy running things, that maybe we might have a conversation about what these medicines have in our society. Because I step back, and when I zoom out, based off of the data that I have seen, not only in my life and my friends' lives, and all the research that I've done subsequent to this, is I believe that we in the United States are suffering from a massive mental health crisis. I mean, that's a whole other conversation about why, but the fact is it's happening. And if we are going to continue to go down the path of SSRIs, which I don't think work. We have the tools to eradicate this. We just need to have a conversation about it, what it looks like, and have the freaking confidence to say this law is garbage and it needs to change.
Yeah, I think it's going to take people like Rick Perry,
Yeah, my
more
heavens.
conservative.
Brad, you nailed it. You may not remember this on our last conversation, but you I don't know if you said it on the podcast or if it was the conversation afterwards. You told me that you think that he had an experience. And I couldn't tell you
Yeah.
at the time, but I knew that he had because I know people close to him who had told
Mm.
me that he had gone down that road. And it was, I think I sent it to you like the next month when he finally publicly disclosed that he went down to Mexico and had an ibogaine experience. And I was like, Brad was right. But yes, guys like Rick Perry, a fighting Texas Aggie, as conservative as they come, right now is out there. He said it. He said his exact words, I am committing my life to this cause. And he is. He's behind the Texas Ibogaine Initiative. He just formed an organization called Americans for Ibogaine. He is leaning into this in ways that you would, if you were writing a movie script, you could not have picked a better person to be the random guy that champions psychedelics other than Rick Perry. And that guy is behind it with a veracity that cannot be matched by anybody. He is in on this.
Yeah, you probably hear me say this a lot, but I feel like we're living in a movie. And
Sure
so
feels
it
like
just,
it.
yeah, right. So yeah, it just makes. But what about misperceptions of those who suffer from PTSD? Again, being a business guy, I don't know that many people who have been through the sort of extreme life experiences that you have, but are there misperceptions out there about people with PTSD? Like, what should we know, or what do you wish people understood better about those who've been through what you've been through?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would have to really think about how I would answer this. I think part of the challenge is for for a lot of veterans who have PTSD or even just anybody in general. I mean, PTSD does not only affect the veteran community, it happens to everybody. I think the first thing that for people to understand is it affects you in ways that you don't anticipate and that even the veteran themselves may not see. I was not really cognizant of how far I had fallen until I knew that I needed to go get help. And I went the traditional route, as I mentioned. And my mom told me, she's like, I've been wanting to tell you this for the last 2 years. You're not the same person. So
Mm.
she saw it in me. I didn't really see it into myself because I was just in this dark cave and I was okay not turning on the lights. PTSD in particular is a very tricky thing because my theory, having gone through this now and healing from it, is that PTSD does not go away until you open up those compartments that I talked about. You have to find a safe way to address those things that have happened. And until you do, my feeling is you'll suffer from it for the rest of your life.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I kind of, no, I don't think I knew. I mean, you told me, you hinted at what you had been through and the psychedelic usage. As you know, I have some experience with psychedelics too, but it just means a lot to me that you were willing to trust me and come on and share it with our audience, because I know a lot of people were waiting to hear what you were going to say today.
Yeah.
It's as powerful as I expected, and I sure hope those listening who have no idea where to turn will hit you up. You're
Yeah.
visible online. Just hit Justin up and say, "Hey man, what do you think? This is what I'm dealing with." You're like me. Like, people tell us things, and unless they tell us not to, like, the way my rule is, if you tell me not to tell anybody, I'm not telling anybody. But if you don't, I'll probably share it. I might not say who it is that's dealing with it,
Yeah.
but then sometimes I do. But then so anyway, I'll ask their permission. But that's how I think about it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's so glad you're
As
well.
I mentioned, Advocacy is a big phase of my life right now, and I'm an advocate, and I'm happy to have conversations with anybody that listens to us that wants to discuss more. I'm happy to do that. If I can share one last thing about the experience that I think is important for people to know is, and this kind of dabbles into the somewhat spiritual side, but two things with this. One, I have never been a stronger believer in God than after that experience. Like to me, it's not even a question. I wouldn't say I was an atheist at all. You know, I grew up Christian, going to the church. I just wasn't motivated. That experience, without a doubt, convinced me that there is a creator, and these tools were given to us for a divine purpose. I would also say the thing that I did not expect is there is an intuition when you work with some of these practitioners. It may sound kind of hippie, but I've bought into it. There is an intuition that these medicines have that cannot be explained. Meaning, if I told you that a lot of the shit that I worked on was me killing a guy in Afghanistan or me nearly crashing my helicopter, that's not what came up. What came up is me reconciling stuff with my father. That was the healing experience that I had. It had nothing to do with Afghanistan or Iraq. It had to do with me going back to being a little boy and patching up things with my dad. And that's the reason why I say that, is because when you drop into these experiences, in order to get the effect that happens, you are releasing control to the intuition that these medicines have. And what will likely happen is it will start to go into those deep compartments and start to reorganize things that you may not realize that you needed to work on. And that was my experience. And I will tell you, probably 90% of all the veterans that I've interviewed after their experience, they say the same thing. They're like, man, I went back to when I was 7 years old and this happened.
Mm.
It had nothing to do with, yeah, I killed this guy in Afghanistan, and I still think about it. I'm not saying that those experiences don't come up, but it's almost like this intuition that these medicines have, it's almost like it works in a hierarchy. It's like, all right, you're here to do some work. Let's start with the foundational issue, dad, because we can't get to this other stuff until you work on the foundational issue. So I worked on dad. And I think that's important to know, because it's the intuition to these things, which then I think is tied to the hip of the spiritual conversation. Because there's just no way to explain what happened to me and what happened to all these other people that I know, other than there's some kind of divine crafting of how this works.
Didn't know that about you, that you were a godly person. And so I hesitated to bring that up. You knew that I was, so I thought I would let you tell me your side. I used to not, the whole saying, God bless you, God bless y'all at the end of a podcast. I didn't used to do that before. And now I feel compelled to do it. And I've changed in so many ways. Do you want to get into my story now?
I would love to, Brad, because one of my most favorite things to do is hear about other people's experience. And I know you listen to Chase Rowan's podcast, or Chase Rowan. I always get his last name mixed up. He and I laugh about it. But hearing Chase's story is amazing about ibogaine. And then you and I had a conversation about that afterwards, and you shared with me your personal experience, which I was honored that you opened up to me about it. And I would love to hear more about how that worked for you.
Yeah, well, the first time I ever heard of ibogaine, you might find this interesting. I was listening to a podcast, and Jordan Belfort was the guest. He is the Wolf of Wall Street. So the actual guy, not the actor, it wasn't Leo DiCaprio on the podcast. It was the guy, and he said he was a massive drug addict. He was on 21 different drugs, and he went down to this ibogaine clinic in Mexico, and he said the staff was emotionally supportive and there for him, and he, after doing ibogaine, was no longer a drug addict and didn't have cravings or anything. So what made me interested, well, Let me back up. I'll give you the whole story and condense it. It was about the time that I walked away from the corporate world. I was having these terrible electric shocks in my head, right above my eyebrow. And I actually thought it was going to kill me because I had been to a bunch of different doctors and had all these different procedures and surgery done, and they just couldn't get rid of it, and they couldn't even determine what it was. And it had a physical manifestation. It looked like a walnut or a pecan. That's what we call them in Louisiana, not a pecan, a pecan, right above my eyebrow. And it was very sensitive to the touch, and it would get these shocks. Well, I tried to I did resist taking opiate medication for a long time until I couldn't anymore. And it started with tramadol, and when that no longer worked, that worked for about 18 months, 2 years, and then hydrocodone, and that was a couple of years, and then oxycodone. And it was it was during COVID. It was 2021 when doctors got a form letter basically blaming them for the opioid epidemic. And they tightened the reins on opiate medication. And I was getting it refilled every 3 months, a 3 month supply. And fortunately, oh, I just saw a whale out there that I've been here for 28 days and I've never seen a whale. And I'm upset that my daughter's not here. How about that? Costa Rica listeners. But they got this form letter. And so I went to two different pain management doctors, and they explained because my primary care, he couldn't prescribe them anymore, was saying you'll have better luck going to a pain management doctor. So I went to a and I was seeing all these neurologists and things. And the pain management doctor said that we're having trouble prescribing opiates too. And he said that some of our patients are having to leave the country. And where it started, where I had to leave the country, was the pharmacy that I had been going to for years just closed for some reason. And the reason I went to an independent pharmacy was because they would give me a 90-day supply, which enabled me to continue to travel and things like that. It's easier, right? Who wouldn't want a 90-day supply instead of a 30? When it closed, I took my prescription to Walgreens, and the guy said, I can't fill this. And I said, why not? And he said, I need to have a relationship with the doctor. I said, well, call him. And he handed it back to me and he said, I'm sorry. So I went back to the doctor's office. We called 3 or 4 different pharmacies. They said they didn't have it in stock. And so what else am I to do? I mean, I needed this medication. So I flew to Mexico and I searched far and wide for a reputable doctor. And I found one that I liked a lot, and she would prescribe oxycodone, which is what I was taking in the United States. This time, man, this is hard to talk. I can't believe I'm finally sharing all this.
Yeah.
So, let me turn my hat to the back. So I finally had this MRI where a neurologist told me that stem cells would fix the problem, basically. He said, but you can't be on opiate medication. And I said, well, I've been on it for years. So I started Googling around what's the quickest way to get off opioid pain medication. And from what I was reading, it was it would have taking one less pill per month. And at this point, I was taking a pill every 4 hours. So what, four a day, something like that. And I was all the way up to about 60 milligrams a day of oxycodone. And when he told me that these stem cells would fix my problem, I was like, I'll do anything. So I just so happened to be listening. I think it was Tucker Carlson's podcast, and Jordan Belfort said that that was how he got off opiate medication. And so I did some research, and I thought, yeah, I'll fly down to Mexico as soon as possible. So I went to like the best, most luxurious, expensive ibogaine clinic, because that's what he did, was ibogaine, and I had never heard of ibogaine. So I go down there, and the first thing they do, it's basically like a rehab. They confiscate all your shit because they don't want people taking drugs in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next thing they do after they confiscate all your stuff is have you pee in a cup. And he said, Mr. D'Antonio, the doctor, like, why are you here again? And I said, well, I've been on opiate medication, tramadol, hydrocodone, oxycodone for about 5 years. And he said, all you have in your system is fentanyl. And I said, and I'm getting chills just talking. It's just, yeah, it's hard to even talk about because the withdrawal was so awful. And I knew that I was facing the most terrible drug that's supposedly more or 50 times stronger than heroin, 100 times stronger than morphine. So what's the withdrawal going to be like? It's not pleasant. In fact, it's hell on earth. And I can't imagine anything more hellish than what I went through. I didn't sleep for 4 days. I didn't eat for 4 days. I didn't go to the bathroom for 4 days. And you're just balled up on the floor, on a cold floor in the fetal position, and the clock never moves slower. And you don't even think that the body is capable of feeling this awful.
Yeah.
It is every symptom that you could read about. I experienced all of them at one time, and you just can't imagine. I couldn't text anybody because I couldn't move. I was like a little kid, so they do give you some help every 4 hours, and they won't tell you what they're giving you. I don't know if it's methadone or I don't know what it is. They won't tell you, but you're begging for that help every you get it every 4 hours. At about 3 hours, you're like a little kid, like jumping around and knocking on the doctor's office door, like, hey, you getting that ready? They call it the dose. You getting that dose ready? And when they give it to you, it's in a little cup that you might use to get your mouth cleaned out with mouthwash. Like it's a little bitty tiny cup, and you're licking the inside of it like a dog, trying to get every last little speck of this help with your withdrawals because it's so incredibly, terribly awful. I had calculated that I would have jumped out of a six-story building to get the drug because your mind becomes warped and all you can think about is the pill. I didn't even know I was addicted. I had a physiological dependence that I realized once I went through this withdrawal, and it was a seriously strong physiological dependence. But I never knew I was addicted because I was taking it for a legitimate pain condition. And I felt like everything in my life had led me up to this point where I could fight it. And what I mean by that is I was raised, needed Jesus, I needed my wife and daughter. Without those three things, let me tell you the hardest thing about rehab. The hardest part about it is nobody's got a gun to your head telling you to stay, and you're
Yeah.
actually paying them. So think about if you don't have that, if you don't have God, I don't know how you do it. If you don't have, if I didn't have my wife and kid, I don't know if I would have made it. It's just so incredibly easy to leave there. And you might find this funny. Everybody who shows up, has a story about getting high on the way in. So I was treated differently, oh, which I appreciated. I was the only one in there for one drug. Most people in there are in there for like 13 different meth and coke and Adderall but ibogaine is magic. I mean, they had people in there for sex addiction, PTSD,
Hmm.
and this was heaven sent. There was a gangster dude who's a rapper that they put me across the hall from him, and I came out of my room in a blanket. I'm in Mexico, right? It's not cold outside, but that's just how the body was feeling, I guess. Came out of there and I came out of the room and he was standing there and he said, "What you coming off of, dog?" And I said, "Fentanyl." And he goes, "Me too. You got this, bro." And he gave me a little dap. But it was powerful, man, because if he wasn't there, I don't know if I'd have gotten through it. Because I
Yeah.
was like, all right, if he can get through it, I can get through it. He was the only one there for fentanyl. And he was actually shooting it up in his vein in his arm to the point where when they would give him IVs, they couldn't find his vein. They couldn't do it that way. I think they put it in his bite. I don't know how they did it. He had it worse than me. He was foaming at the mouth and vomiting, just horrific vomiting around the pool in front of everybody. So I thought, oh shit, this is what I have to look forward to. But he gave me great advice. He said those doses only come every 4 hours. He said what you do is you fill your bathtub up with scalding hot water and just stay up in that tub until the next dose. And I started doing that. I stayed in a bathtub for 3 hours and 45 minutes. And I came out of there looking super fly, like I do. And that's when they know once you've taken a bath that you're on the road to recovery. Like they're evaluating your strength and whether or not you're willing to bathe yourself and things like that. And that's kind of how they determine how long you're going to be there. So they don't let you do ibogaine until you piss negative. And it took me 6 days, which I don't know if that's good or not, but that's how long it took me. So on the seventh day, they do what's called the flood dose. And one of the side effects of or one of the symptoms of withdrawal for fentanyl is that you don't sleep. So I didn't sleep much at all. I didn't sleep at all before the flood dose. They want you to hydrate like crazy. At 7 a.m., you go into what looks like a hospital, like an emergency room. They have hospital beds. It's the real deal, man. They hook you up. They do an EKG because they got to monitor your heart because, like any drug, there are possible negative consequences. People have died. I don't, it's probably 1 in a million or 1 in a billion. I don't know what the odds are on that, but I was willing to take whatever that risk is. So anyway, this is where it gets wild. So they told me if you have pain, so they were giving me Toradol, which is what they give a lot of NFL players at halftime. They were giving me a muscle relaxer, and they were giving me something else. I don't remember what now, but they wouldn't give me any of that the day of the flood dose. But they said, let us know if you have pain and we'll help you. I was terribly scared of being off of medication entirely because I had this pain, this awful pain in my head. So I also have neck problems, but I don't want to make this podcast longer than it needs to be. So anyway, what happens is they give you the ibogaine in the form of translucent pills, and it's got little beads in it, and they gave me 7 of them. I don't know how many milligrams. And you're laying in a hospital bed. The owner, guy's name is Tom, total love the dude. I told my wife when I got back, I said, if I had to spend 30 days with somebody other than you, it would be him. I like the guy that much. Great storyteller, kept me laughing a lot. Anyway, so he's standing there talking to me, and he's actually telling me the story of Jordan Belfort when he was in there, and that's some really good stories. I'll share another time. But they give you the medicine, and then they say, "Tell me when you feel it." And my legs went tingly, and my everything was tingling, and I was like, "I feel it." And then the nurse comes over and puts this heavy eye mask on me, and then puts the headphones on my ears and says, "Enjoy your journey." What's playing in the headphones is this African beat sort of music. So for those not familiar with ibogaine, it's derived from the iboga plant in Gabon, Africa. It can't be synthesized. You can't make it artificially in a lab. It has to come from. So it's very hard to get, and of course, it's illegal in the United States. So you're hearing all these beats, and I was warned before I went in that I might talk to my dead grandparents. And to me, that sounds like one of those woo-woo things. Yeah, whatever, dude, you're nuts. So as it starts, there's an old man who I don't recognize, and I can see every contour, every wrinkle of his face. He is so vivid to me. And he is so vivid because he had just taken a handkerchief out of his pocket and like cleaned off the window for me. Weird, right? Well, they told me that while you're taking ibogaine, you can basically swipe right with your mind or swipe
Mm-hmm.
left, and you'll get a new vision. So the first thing I saw after this, like I was staring at this man and I was like, I don't recognize this man. What is the message here? I don't get it. Swipe left and I'm in this 1960s classroom. And I'm thinking, what is the point of this? And I'm looking at the chalkboard, swipe left again, and boom, there's my grandfather.
Mm.
All my grandparents are dead. And what's crazy about that is that he's a World War II veteran. He fought in the Pacific Theater, and he was always afraid to tell me his story. But I got to read a lot about it after he died, but I wish I was too young to appreciate it anyway if he had told me. But I got to talk to him as a 19-year-old in his Navy outfit, which was so cool, man. And then and then I talked to my grandma, and then I talked to my other pawpaw. Then I got to talk to the first grandfather, his age when he died, which was like 74. And I just couldn't believe it. It was more real than me talking to you. And what's crazy about all this is that it's in your mind. You just can't access it, which is crazy. And it's so real. So after I'm done, I tried to get that to last as long as I possibly could. But then afterward, my next vision was, have you ever been to a Mardi Gras parade like in New Orleans?
Hmm. Yeah, I
Okay.
have.
So maybe you've seen where when I was a kid, there was a ladder that you sit on to catch throws that they throw from the floats that go through. On top of that ladder, there's this little box that kids sit in. And usually the dad is sitting behind them and waving his hands. Throw me something, mister. Well, this was a single, a one-seater that I'm sitting in. There's no ladder. It's just me in a box. And I start floating over all the places I've been in the world. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. New Zealand and Prague and, like all, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm floating and I'm thinking, I wonder if that means I'm a free spirit, because the guy next to me who's there for anxiety and depression is crying hysterically for like 4 hours. Other people throw up for 4 hours. They say if you harbor secrets, you throw up during ibogaine. So anyway, after I'm floating around, I'm transported into my first grade desk, and I knew everybody's name. It was more real than as if I was actually in my first grade desk. And I thought, well, let me see if I can do this in every grade. And I proceeded to do it throughout the rest of my junior high, high school, and just looking around at everybody, and I knew everybody's name. And all this lasted for about an hour and 40 minutes. And I woke up, and you can't see anything. You're allowed to you can do whatever you want, but you can't move. Like when you have to pee because you've hydrated so much, they give you one of those bedpan things where you kind of lean on the side of the bed to pee.
Hmm.
At 4 hours in, I started getting heavy. I got a lot of pain in my neck, in my head, and I don't know what they put in my IV to help, but it helped. And then if you, I was going to say, like, if you try to get up, it's as if gravity is like 20x on you. You can't really move. And the reason I know that is because at about the 8 hour mark, my legs started flailing uncontrollably. Couldn't stop them. And that was the most uncomfortable thing ever. And that went on for about 45 minutes. And the doctor said, "Are you in pain?" And I said, "No, but this is really, really uncomfortable. Can you make it stop?" So that's another thing. When you go to one of these clinics that I couldn't believe, they give you all sorts of drugs that a lot of the people request, like the patients request all sorts of drugs. And they would tell me, if you need something, say you need something. I had never taken Ambien or Xanax or any of that in my life. I was given all of that as I was going through all this withdrawal. And I would think, how can they I mean, like a whole Xanax bar. And I'm thinking, how can they do that? And they shot me up with diazepam and the booty a couple times because I was for the first time in my life, I said, I'm anxious. I'm so anxious. So anyway, they give you a lot of help. Oh, and there's a lot of crying. Oh, is
Yeah.
there crying?
Hmm.
Yeah, cried like real bad. And I think they're willing to give you all these drugs because they know they can get you off of them. That's my
Hmm.
theory. So finally, one of the nurses picks me up, and you're taking like baby steps, like you're about to bungee jump. That's how I was when I was about to bungee anyway, because you can't walk. So she's walking you around like an old man, and they walked me outside, and they gave me some fruit because you had to fast all night or whatever. So they put me back in the bed at about the 8 hour mark, and then you're like a little kid, like, hey, how much more time, how much more time, how much more time, because you would think, oh, I can lay in a bed for 12 hours. You have to lay there from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. No, it is so incredibly hard to lay there on your back. One of the side effects of ibogaine is wakefulness. So you couldn't sleep if you wanted to, and I didn't sleep the following night. In fact, once it's finally over, they walk you back to your room and basically throw you on the bed because the next 24 hours, they call that a gray day because the ibogaine is so powerful for what it does. It's almost like you can feel it working because you can feel these little like clicks in your head. And supposedly what it's doing is resetting basically your opioid receptors. to where it's as though you've never taken an opioid in your life. Well, the aftermath was brutal. That was a Wednesday that I went in for the flood dose, and then on Friday they do what's called a booster, where they gave me 2 pills instead of 7, and that was only 2 hours, and I was able to sleep through most of it. I didn't have any visions on that second one. But do you have any questions, man? I know I'm throwing a lot at you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, first reaction is to say thank you for giving me the honor of hearing that story and you telling it in this forum publicly, and me being the one in the seat. I mean, with all humility, like I just feel very honored that we are doing this together. And so I'll ask a couple questions, but if you don't mind, I want to give a couple reactions. The thing that I think is that hit me when you told me your story, and I have come to this by talking to other addicts. Chase is, I know you'll eventually have him on your podcast. Chase will be a great example of like sharing his story. And it has given me a new perspective on addiction, where I used to think addiction was a sign of weakness. I was like, people who are addicts are just weak. And it's like, no, there is something physiologically gripping your body that even the strongest person that you know, once there is an addiction, it will consume you. And unless there is some kind of intervention, it doesn't matter how tough you are, it's going to take you. So hearing you say that, for people who don't know our backstory, is I was, I was a freshman looking up to Brad D'Antonio on the baseball team back in high school. And, that's a formative time in your life where you look at you and Chase Lambin and, Jamie Bubella, you guys are still legends in my mind. And I look at you like almost like in a mentor fashion, like, man, like Brad D'Antonio, really? And so to hear you go through that and for you to struggle just affirms to me that the story around addiction has to change, the narrative around it. Now, like what brings us into that addictive state, like that's a different conversation. But the fact is, once you have entered the addictive state, it is extremely difficult to shake. So I appreciate that you shared that, because that really brings it home for me. I
Well,
think the question,
that's why I think it's important that we do share, because so many people do look up to us, and for the most part, we're normal dudes. But
yeah,
just to let you know, this shit could happen to anybody.
yeah,
I was told, I don't know if I shared this with you, but they told me if I had taken more than 1 pill in a 4 hour period, that I'd be dead. So, and that's part of the reason I said everything in my life led me up to this point. If I didn't have the discipline to only want to mitigate the pain, if I wanted to get even a little bit high, I'm dead. A lot of people die from this shit. It's the number
yeah,
one killer. Oh yeah, it's scary. Very scary, man. And by the way, I would have gone to federal prison for 1 year if I had ever been caught with fentanyl in my carry-on bag, which I did,
yeah,
5 or 6 times,
yeah,
not knowing that I was carrying fentanyl, but I
yeah.
was. Yeah.
It's so scary. I can only imagine when you look back how that feels. Yeah, so I've done a lot of research, and I know that the ibogaine experience is very unique in how challenging it is. And
Hmm.
for people that are listening to us, ibogaine is unique from the other psychedelics in that they do hook you up to, I think it's magnesium. It's a certain type of magnesium, because there are noted issues with like heart arrhythmias that can be caused with ibogaine. So they supplement with magnesium to make sure it's safe. Otherwise, my understanding is like psychedelics in general are extremely safe. I just wanted to say that. But my question to you is, how would the experience been different if you didn't have the group of guys that you were with around you?
Dude, that's such a great question, especially coming from you, because I know the camaraderie and brotherhood that you guys who've been through some really, really hard, tough stuff, the bond that you build. The guy that I mentioned, the guy that was next to me, I don't think I've shared this with anybody before. He had to put it on a credit card. This place was expensive. I told him as we were about to be go under or go through our journey, told him that I was going to help him pay for it. And he told me how much that helped him. And he came to visit me. He's a Jewish rabbi. He came to visit me in Houston like a month later. You know, it's love. Like there's so much love. When somebody leaves there, you're crying because you know they just were given their life back. And so it's a brotherhood. You've been through hell together. This dude, so I've told this story recently, and I said that I was at a retreat. I was at an ibogaine retreat. The dude who I said used to pimp hoes on Bissonnette, that was the gangster dude that went through the same hell that I went through. And we had a vision, man. We talked about we're gonna go eat at Eddie V's in Houston once we got out of here. And we haven't done that yet. I don't know where he is. And God, I pray that he's okay. He stopped replying to my texts, probably because I was, he would say things and I'd be like, bet. He's trying to be cool, and he's like, this dude's not cool. I don't know. But yeah, the bond is incredible, man. There was a guy in there that was addicted to internet pornography and was spending 14 hours a day looking at it. There was a guy in there who said it was his 100th time in rehab. A lot of people, I don't know if he successfully, he had never done ibogaine, but a lot of these rehabs are crap. It's a money making thing. But I have such crazy stories, like the aftermath. You talked about how you're not yet fully recovered, like you're not yourself. They tell us not to make any major life decisions, that you're not going to be yourself for about 45 days. There are people that I contact, like I have so many things that if I were to dwell on them, regret from the years 2021 to 2023. I wasn't in my right mind. And I can't go back and listen to old podcast episodes because I find myself to be slow and not sharp, and I didn't laugh much. And I think it had
Yeah.
to do with what I was feeling in my head, but it was also this drug I was on that was making me a different person. So if you're out there and I texted you or sent you something just like, who is this dude? Yeah, I was on some serious drugs and didn't know it. And
Yeah.
it's embarrassing, but I coming away from it, kind of what you talked about, how you don't care what people think, like it just the trivial things just are so trivial to me now. After you've been through that sort of hell, you kind of feel. I always talk about like the difference between resilience and anti-fragility, in that resilience is the ability to bounce back from something. And I felt like I was resilient prior to this experience, but now I feel as though I'm anti-fragile in a way that I can gain from chaotic time. I will benefit from it. I will use it. I will use this platform that I have to help as many people as I can. And when you're others directed that way, you couldn't care less what people think about you, because it doesn't matter, because the people who were there for you, like my best man Byron picked me up from the airport. I had to crawl. I was trying to get home for my daughter's third birthday party, which was Saturday. So I did the flood dose on Wednesday, the booster on Friday, and asked the owner when he thought I'd be able to leave. I was supposed to be there for up to 18 days, maybe more, but they let me go on day 10, and I wanted to surprise my family. That was a mistake because I was crawling in the airport. I had to crawl around my room just to pack up my little suitcase. It was so freaking miserable. I had no energy. They tell you to listen to music as much as possible. So I had AirPods in at all times. I don't know how that serves as such a good distraction, but you really are not human for about 45 days. And this was January of 24. So yeah, that January to March time, but even before that, I probably did some really stupid shit and said some stupid things that I regret, but I don't even want to look back on it. I'm just like full speed ahead, with the rest of life now that I've been given my life back. Now I still deal with, so what's magical is ibogaine got rid of these headaches or this pain in my head that I had had for 10 years, maybe 8 or 9 years, that I had had a surgery for. It totally cured it amazingly. The knot above my eyebrow went away. But now I have all these bulging discs and neck problems that I'm dealing with, which is why I can only do a freaking 45-minute podcast every week because I can't work that much. I'm blessed to be able to do the work that I do, which is just working like this, which I can do. But after this, I'll be laying on the ice. So I'm going to have surgery at the end of the year for my neck
Yeah.
issues, but my head and neck issues were probably related. And I don't know if there was some sort of residual, what do they call it? Like an analgesic sort of thing, because I was on opiates so long, sometimes you can get a worse problem from pain. And that could have been some of it, but it's wild, man.
So I wanted to add, because I know people that listen to this, there's going to be skeptics. And let me say, I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm just trying to provide information. There is really, really good clinical research on what is happening in the brain with psychedelics in general, but ibogaine specifically. Now, part of the reason why ibogaine is the psychedelic of choice right now for addiction. So addiction is usually okay, you have the opioid receptors that are all jacked up like you said, but it's also dopamine. So your dopamine, when you have a pleasurable experience, your dopamine shoots through the roof and then it crashes. And when you do that a lot through internet porn or drugs or whatever, or me walking on a trail to go chase a bear, that dopamine, when it resets, it starts to reset at lower and lower and lower levels. And so the only way to replicate that is to get that next hit, to go back to the slot machine and pull the lever. So opioid is particularly a problematic because it's peeling on the opioid receptors and the dopamine. So it's got both. And what is fascinating about ibogaine, this is going to lead to my next question, Brad, is the science behind it is if you went the traditional route and tried to kick an opioid addiction without any other intervention, the number is it's something between 12 to 18 months that your opioid and dopamine receptors would return back to some level close to normal, 12 to 18 months. But ibogaine accomplishes that in 10 hours. It resets your dopamine and opioid receptors within one night. So when you know that, and I'm not just making that up, that is research that they now know is true. So if you have an addiction, whether it is to an opioid or to gambling, you can try to fight it, and God bless you if you can pull it off. But what ibogaine does is it's basically an accelerant that resets that dopamine and opioid receptors to levels that you would take a year to get. So
Mhm.
my question to you is, when did you know that everything had changed?
Immediately. There's something called post-acute withdrawal symptoms, PAWS. I had none of that. I was kind of waiting for it because they say there might be a little bit of it, a little bit of withdrawal. None. And so I'm like, this is so amazing. Like, did it really just reset everything? And you know what happens to a lot of people? The first thing I did when I got home was took all of the medicine that I had left and put it down the toilet, which almost brings a tear to my eye too. Just knowing I had been on medicine, I had to have medicine with me at all times to keep these electric shocks from happening in my forehead. Sorry, what was your question? How did I know everything was
When did you
changed?
know that everything was different?
Yeah, immediately. When I no longer needed a drug, but my neck, when it got rid of my head problem, my neck was exacerbated real bad. So I don't
Yeah,
know if
yeah.
I might have neglected to mention this, but the whole stem cells that I had done, that's why I got off of opiates. It didn't work. And I went to physical therapy twice a week for almost a year, and that didn't work. I had 3 or 4 different procedures where they inject my neck 100 plus times. That didn't work. I had epidurals, so I'm still trying to find a cure. And hopefully, I have a consultation with a neurosurgeon on November 3rd. So we'll see. There's so much I could tell you.
What do you make of seeing your grandfather at 19?
I don't know if that was just a strong yearning for me. because I'm always trying to get wiser and learn and really, not that I regret not paying attention. I was too young to appreciate them, my grandfathers. And I'd do anything. I've always said this, like I'd sacrifice a digit or two to just have a conversation with them. And so maybe it was that. I don't know, but it's a common experience. So how do you explain that? No. But
That's
it's interesting we bring up God because this clinic, not everybody is a prayerful person, let's say, not a believer. And they have like motivating quotes hung up in frames around this clinic. And it would say things like love is the most powerful technology. And I've never, I don't want to say never, but I felt so loved when I was there. It was a magical experience. And you do all this, you do integration work, you do all this prep work too. And you light a candle and you write on the candle what it is that you're trying to accomplish in life because it helps you to reprioritize your life. And everybody's there for a different reason, but they talk about this plant medicine like it's God. And being a godly person, I think that God made this plant to heal us, to heal humanity. And since I've been back, I've recommended ibogaine to just about everybody who will listen to my story. It's not just addicts who would benefit. It's not just those struggling with PTSD and depression and anxiety. I want to go back because I would get something out of it that would be more, not getting me from negative 100 to even. It would be like taking me from even to hopefully 100. You see what I'm saying? So I would love to do more of that. And I know you and I have talked about possibly getting together to do psilocybin or
yeah.
ayahuasca or something like that. Just for listeners so they know, supposedly ibogaine is like the mecca of psychedelics. Like it's supposed to be so much more powerful than what a DMT or ayahuasca would be.
So yeah, so my understanding is, and again, this is where when people hear these things, they start to be like, oh, this is weird hippie shit. But until you talk to people that have had these experiences, like once you talk to people and you start hearing it again and again and again, you have to start asking yourself what's behind that. So I have always understood that ibogaine is what they consider the grandfather medicine. It's a little bit more masculine, it's a little harsher. It's quite
Mm.
harsh actually. Obviously you shared your story, but it's a grandfather medicine. Ayahuasca, my understanding of people who have had that experience is it's a grandmother medicine, or it's a motherly medicine. When you talk to people that work in those circles, they talk about a female spirit that is still very harsh when she needs to be, but very gentle and nurturing when she must. And then psilocybin is more of a kind of an ethereal global connection to the planet and to mankind. You don't really so much connect with a spirit or an entity as much as you connect globally with other people. And I think that's where they all have manifestations of love, but they're definitely different tools. Like you mentioned, throwing up in ibogaine. Ayahuasca is one where they call it purge, and the idea is that you're purging all the bad stuff out of your body. And when you mentioned your leg shake, I wrote that down because I have seen this with people and in my interviews talked about it. And I've talked to people who are in the know of these things. That shaking is a form of purging as well. So this idea is maybe you've had this experience, but have you ever had like a near death experience where you start shaking? You just like
Oh yeah, I've
something
gotten into
happens.
that, but it's related to this. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is all of these chemicals, neurochemicals that are releasing into your body. And when that experience is over, your body has a way of rechanneling that and metabolizing it, and it shows up as shaking. So that shaking is actually moving those neurochemicals throughout your body in order to help metabolize it. Sometimes when people go through a traumatic experience, that shaking gets interrupted. And so that energy, I mean, it sounds hippie to say it, but that energy is left manifest in the body. So the theory and the idea is that if you were to go to an ayahuasca circle or see people who are really, really deep in a psychedelic experience, they may start to shake. And the thought
Mhm.
process is that is the body somatically releasing that from the body. It's basically completing the trauma cycle so you can move on from that.
You know, one thing that's changed with me since that experience is I don't kill anything. So I've never really been a hunter. I've gone with Chase a time or two, but bugs on the ground,
Yeah.
you know, I'll
Yeah.
kill a roach for the ladies in my house, but other than that, for some reason, I can't kill anything. And I think that speaks to the oneness with the world and humanity and living beings and things like that. When you talk about purging, during that 45 days afterward, before I was fully human, I felt the need to purge secrets, which is weird. And this might tie in with why people go to confession. I just felt this compulsion to call up my best man and tell him about something he didn't know about me. And I've always advocated for that. Like, there should be people in the world who know every single thing about you, and they'll still love you. And that's fulfilling and life giving. Was something about me too. I just started confessing to things that I had done in the past and that I just wasn't proud of or whatever. Does
Yeah.
that happen with psilocybin at all?
Yeah. No, I was going to save this and parlay it into a question, so I may just jump into it here with you is what changed for me. And I feel the same way. Like it's very strange, the feeling, not that I go out to seek killing anything, but I go out and walk around where I'm at now, and there will be snails on the ground, and I'm like walking at night and I'm crunching on snails, and I'm like, oh man, I feel bad. I just killed a snail, and then I try to alter my path so as not to kill snails. It's a very interesting thing that happens after that. But the overwhelming feeling that I've had since my experience is love. And I don't feel weird telling people like you, Brad, that I absolutely fucking love you. And I think that that needs to be more common. And I don't know what happened to hold me back from that, but I don't have a problem getting weird and telling somebody that I love them. In fact, I feel like this compulsion to tell people I love them. I mean, I don't know if Bopper or Kyle Christenick will listen to this, but I tell that guy I love him all the time. I just think of so many people in my life and how much I love them. And actually, I will say, when I was probably in the deepest part of that experience, is I had this overwhelming feeling of wishing people in my life that I do love could be there with me. I'm like, they need to be here right now. I want them. If I could transport them into that room and be with me, I would have done it. So, yeah. Your mic's off.
You with me?
Yeah, I'm with you.
You with me?
Yeah, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
So sorry, listeners. I just had a technical malfunction, but I'm back.
Yeah. No, I was just talking about how I felt that profound feeling of love, and my question to you, Brad, is what would you say is different now?
Love. I think you hit the nail on the head. I am King Daddy telling people that I love them and just realizing, Tom Petty, Prince, Mac Miller, they all died of an opioid overdose that they didn't. uh, It can happen to anybody, and 43 years is probably all I should have gotten for all that I went through. And I didn't even go into who I was dealing with in these pharmacies in Mexico. They would have a white lab coat on, they'd have a picture with their family on their WhatsApp. No, I was dealing with the Sinaloa cartel and didn't know it. And so that's where the terrifying shaking and envisioning a DEA agent calling or showing up at my wife's door and saying that your husband's head has been found in an ice box on a dusty road in the Yucatan. I mean, that was my fear. But I would say too, man, through the last, say, 3 or 4 months, it was September 23 was the last time I went down there to get a refill. And between September and me going to this ibogaine clinic in January, I would tell my wife, you know what? I might be addicted to this drug. I can't tell. And she would want to go places, and I'd be like, no, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to talk to anybody. And I think that was all, it was all fentanyl that was messing with me. And I had no idea. And like, I, and I had, you talk about going on the bear trail. I had, I had thoughts of, because I've jumped off of things like bungee jumped, I had thoughts of doing that. And I had thoughts of driving my car. I wanted to, there was somebody in particular whose life I wanted to end. And then I had thoughts of, I had some terrible, 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 terrible thoughts, and it all happened in those last months leading up to going to get ibogaine. So
Yeah.
my wife would tell you that I'm a completely changed person. I don't really argue with people anymore, whereas I used to take great satisfaction in winning an argument. Now I'm just like, I just do not care. So I'm
Yeah.
much calmer, more peaceful. I see people in the neighborhood when I'm going on a walk, and I'll be like, "Hey man, you doing okay?" I just want to know. I have this new empathy where all my life my mom has asked me, "Hey, how Bradley, how you feeling?" And I would always think, "Who cares how I'm feeling? Like I'm doing, I'm getting shit done, and I don't ever pay attention to how I'm feeling." Well, I didn't know what the body was even capable of feeling, this range of emotion and feeling sensations in the body that I didn't know existed. And now I'm thinking, what if my mom is experiencing just 10% of that? That would be so awful. So now I find myself asking with genuine curiosity, like, "Hey mom, how you been feeling?" And that's not
Yeah.
me. I never said that the first 43 years of my life. When we passed the security guard here, we're staying in this building in Costa Rica. I give the peace sign every time I pass by. That's not me, but and maybe that's the hippy dippy part of it. Like you just become this more peaceful human and hopefully more pleasurable to be around. I so much more appreciate relationships. I mean, I like to think I always did, but now when I'm in the States, I make it a point. I will drive 6 hours to make sure I see my friends that year. Because as you get older, you start having kids, you don't get to see your friends. No, I'm going to visit my college buddy, my college roommate. I'm going to see him in November. I'm going to make a point. So I've changed in all kinds of ways.
Yeah. Man, hearing you say that again just reinforces to me, first of all, that a lot more empathy is warranted to people who are going through some kind of an addiction. And also, man, what's so bad about making this world a little bit more peaceful and loving? I know it sounds hippie, but like that's why when I opened about there being a mental health crisis in the United States, particularly the United States, because I've, just like you, I've traveled the world. And it's not to say that there aren't problems in other parts of the world, but the problems are different. What we are suffering from in the United States is a self-inflicted mental health crisis where we are literally at each other's throats all the time about shit that doesn't matter. And I will tell you this, my theory is, from seeing friends go through this and my own experience, is that if the United States, this is a fantasy, was to all have a psychedelic ceremony all at the same time,
Mhm.
we would wake up 2 or 3 days later with a fundamental change in how we operate. We wouldn't be the same. We would not be the same. And if you know Graham Hancock, he's been on Rogan's podcast, and he jokingly says that every world leader should be required to go through 10 ayahuasca ceremonies before they take command of a country. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think if somebody I would almost be more trusting of somebody knowing that they've had deep, meaningful psychedelic experiences than not. That's how strongly I have seen the change manifest in people that I know. That when I hear your story, when I share mine, and when I see them, it's almost as though they're not even the same person, and they are changed in ways that are all good. Like, why would it be so bad to be more loving, to be more kind, to be more thoughtful, to be more peaceful? Is that so wrong? I mean, those are the second and third order effects of these. It's not just, yeah, I kicked an addiction, or yeah, I got over depression. It's that I'm a better human after this.
It's really well said. And as far as having empathy for addicts, I don't know at what level your dopamine levels increase when you've had a hit. Like, so everybody's different. Our biology is different. Our makeup, our chemistry, everything is different from person to person. And you learn this in high school. I don't know if you drank in high school, but I did. And you wouldn't get behind the wheel of a car with some dudes who had had 4 beers, but you could have rode with me. I'd have given you a ride home and it'd have been no problem, I promise. And you see that today with people who get drunk easily. Well, if the dopamine levels increase to the point where somebody really, really enjoys it right away, then they're going to have a tough time stopping. And so that's one of my concerns. I mean, even like a fat kid, you go to the pool party when you're 8 years old, the kid who lines up for pizza first is gonna be Bopper. He was a little chubby kid, right? Because he likes to eat more. Whereas I don't smell well, so I don't taste well. Like I eat whatever my wife puts in front of me, and I don't care. Like I care more about the effect of food more than the taste, which I benefit from because I'm still pretty slim. I look all right. Probably not as good as you with my shirt off, but I can pass. So I do have that sort of concern. They talk about, like, as it pertains to alcoholics, it's your susceptibility to intoxication, which is the best indicator as to whether or not you'll be an alcoholic, whereas many people think it's hereditary. So that speaks to the dopamine levels of, if you have a couple of drinks, how excitable do you get relative to the next person? And so some people are blessed to not have to deal with alcoholism in that way. Or like President Trump, he's like, I had a brother who was an alcoholic, I'm never going to touch it. And that makes me think, he's so energetic at almost 80 years old. I'm like, shit, I don't want to touch alcohol. I don't want to touch anything.
Yeah.
So that's something that I wish that we knew, like people's chemistry. You might have heard me talk about before. I wish we knew how much the other guy is fulfilled who's driving around in a Maserati and, you know, got a
Yeah.
three-story house. Like, how fulfilled is that guy? If we could know his inner workings, that would better inform us how to live, I think. You talked about everybody doing ayahuasca. Yeah, I've heard Rogan say that. Graham Hancock said that leaders should do some sort of type of psychedelic. I agree with that, but I would only, it's like you'll only hear that from people who have done it, which is why I'm so glad that Rick Perry is involved. But I'm afraid that with this social contagion, this epidemic of mental illness that we have, it makes me wonder if the human isn't hardwired to find problems when most of their material needs are met. When they have a roof over the head, when they have food to eat, they have maybe even a loving partner. Do you create imaginary problems? Like, do you go to a protest hoping that there's not a king someday? Like, is that what it leads you to do?
Well, is what is happening in the United States not some form of addiction? Meaning, like, people are arguing because it's fun to argue. It's exciting to argue. It's exciting to get into a debate. It's exciting to find the boogeyman that you can attack and do all this. And I wouldn't be shocked if we studied that and saw that there's a dopamine spike and then a dopamine crash, and then it's addictive. I mean, we already know social media. Social media works on the same mechanisms of dopamine, and it has the same effect as a cocaine hit. It's the same thing. That scrolling is the same response in your brain. It's no different. So if you get your report that you're spending 6 hours on social media a day, you're the same as a cocaine addict. It's the same neural mechanism. Just one is potentially could kill you, and one is just going to suck away your life bitching about things on Facebook. So it's the same problem. And I think the same solution is get rid of the addiction. First of all, recognize that it's an addiction and then fight it. But I mean, the mental health crisis is so, it's frustrating because I virtually am 100% sure that we can fix it. We can fix it. We have the ability to fix it. We put a man on the moon in the 60s. All we have to do is change a law, make it affordable to people, and give people the options and destigmatize it. Because once that happens, then this grows. And it already is growing. It's just, there are so many people in my life that have these experiences. They just don't talk about it publicly because of the stigma that follows.
Mm-hmm.
But that's changing. And I think conversations like this will help that. And, for people that are, like I said, for people that are interested and want to talk more, I offer my time. I feel obligated and called to do this. And that's why I'm not shocked when Rick Perry says he's going to dedicate his life for the cause. That's that's how powerful it is. And if I can, just a couple plugs for people to put on their radar. So you can go on Netflix right now and watch the Netflix series How to Change Your Mind, which was Michael Pollan's. It's not exactly his book, but it's inspired by the book, but that's on Netflix. There's I think 4 episodes. I would highly encourage people to watch that. I think the first episode is of a guy who was obsessive compulsive, like debilitating OCD, who got rid of it through psilocybin and got his life back. Also, I think it's either November 2nd or November 10th. So next month, there's going to be another release on Netflix of a documentary called On Waves and War. And that one is following veterans who go through an ibogaine experience. And I haven't seen the film. I know friends who have, and they said it's very, very well done, very potent. But what I would suspect you will see if you watch that are tatted up, badass Navy SEALs crying and hugging each other because their lives have changed. And if you can't appreciate the dichotomy or the polarity of that, then you're missing the whole point of this conversation, which is these things work and they change people in ways that are only divinely described.
Yes. And if Rick Perry somehow catches a piece of this conversation and is interested in us helping, I've tried to reach out to Rick Perry to
Yeah.
see if I could help with the Texas Ibogaine initiative. I haven't heard back, but I'd love to help.
Well, you got to, I mean, get in touch with Chase. Chase gets called from Rick Perry. I mean, I don't want to like blow Chase up, but Chase Rowan is a great follow on this. He gets calls from Rick Perry often. So if you want to get connected to Governor Perry, you got to talk to Chase, and Chase can make the introduction. So
I will. I know he's good buddies with Marcus Luttrell, right?
yeah, yeah.
Have you met Marcus Luttrell?
No, I haven't. I haven't, but maybe one day we'll kick it.
Cool. Anything else, my
Um,
man?
yeah, I was going to share one more thing, just because I know my passion runs high on this. The other thing that's exciting about where the research is going is to treat other issues. So there's a great research paper out there. It was a small sample size, so it's hard to draw any causality, but they looked at ibogaine treating MS and 2 people that basically had advanced MS that were, I mean, immobile. I think one had lost control of their bladder. After treatment of ibogaine, there was noticeable improvement. So there's something that's going on in the brain. And I also know that they're looking at right now stroke victims for psilocybin and various other things because of the neuroplasticity. So it's not just depression, it's not just addiction. The research on this is very exciting because it looks like it could treat other issues, even like potentially dementia. I know there's another study with that. So
Just gonna say that. But so my stepmom's dad just recently passed. But I thought if I told them about these studies that show that psychedelics are helping with dementia, they would not research it any further. It's that far out there for people in America right now, and I'm afraid until it's legalized, and hopefully Texas is leading the way, until it's legalized, it's just not going to get into the purview of your average boomer like my dad.
yeah, well, that's why we got to keep having these conversations, Brad. And man, I'm just again very humbled and honored that you gave me this opportunity. I know it's getting dark over there in Costa Rica. You're about to black out there, but man, yeah, look at that
About that.
beautiful sunset right there. Um, but I just have to say, I haven't talked publicly about this, and for all the reasons around stigma, I've been waiting for this opportunity, but this felt right. You were the right person for this. I love your podcast. I love the work that you do, and I just, man, I'm very honored that you shared this with me.
I feel entirely the same way. You were like a little brother to me coming up in high school, and when we reconnected, it was like, man, this is the same dude, and I like him just as much. And I hope
Uh,
that this friendship grows, and I hope that we have a psychedelic experience together someday. And man, let's keep doing this.
yeah, let's do it, man. I definitely definitely appreciate where this has gone and where this is going, Brad. And let me also then close by saying, I love you.
I love you, buddy. If I can do anything for you, let me know. And I would tell listeners the same. We're here to help you if you need to talk, if you need a recommendation. Justin knows some people. I like to think that I know some people. Justin knows a lot more people than I do. So get in touch with us. We'll help. If you enjoyed this episode, friends, please copy the link and share it with a friend. And y'all know where to find me. Justin, how can they contact you?
I'm on the socials. I can be found on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. J_Lane, I think is what I use. Otherwise, Justin Jackson on Facebook. Yeah, I'm out there.
You're the man. Thank you for tuning in, folks. God bless y'all. Bye-bye.